G'day folks, my name is Rob. Welcome back to another F1 fantasy video. Today I want to preview race week 1 and provide some final thoughts ahead of the Bahrain GP this weekend. If you're watching, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel. Really having an awesome time on YouTube so far, so thanks for all of the support. Let's get straight into it. I've got a number of things I just want to consider, something you guys should probably digest as well if you haven't already. Key points heading into the first fantasy weekend this year. So top of my list, DRS boost. As the rules have changed this year, as you may already know, all drivers are in contention for the 2x point multiplier once you assign that chip to them. Verstappen is the most popular choice in the game. He is owned by 57% of all players, and I'd say a large part of that is because they're able to DRS boost him. Leclerc, another alternative if you want to go against the grain a little bit. He was the most popular turbo driver pick in 2022 and has proven over the course of the last season especially that he warrants attention for this chip too. Verstappen though, he's completely dominated from the outset in testing. Red Bull looks like an exceptional outfit heading into this season and are the deserved driver and constructor favourites for this season. Leclerc though, he did have a really good performance in Bahrain last season, qualified and finished the race in first. So he's got a good history at that track, going off last year's performance. Ferrari have a really good car on the straights, so we'll get into that a bit more in a little bit. But I really like both of these options. I would probably avoid any other for that matter, unless you want to go super differential. But Verstappen is understandably the best pick for the DRS boost chip this weekend. As for constructors, Red Bull, because of what I mentioned, is the clear-cut best choice heading into the race. Perez and Verstappen both look very comfortable in testing. The car just looks very strong across the board, both on the straights and in the corners. So for me, they are a non-negotiable. They do also have quite high ownership, so that's not a surprise to me at all. The other two constructors, Ferrari and Aston Martin, are probably the only other constructors I'm giving any serious thought to at the moment. Aston Martin, they're at a bargain bin price. I think it's around 6.7 million. So for many, it's a no-brainer based on what we've already seen in pre-season. I guess a concern I have around not owning them is assuming they have a strong performance out of the blocks in Bahrain, what their revised price will be based on last season. F1 retrospectively adjusted prices with absolutely no logic or explanation to it, and I'm concerned that this could happen again. I would like to think F1 have learnt their lessons from last season's debacle, but you just don't know. There's been no communications on that front. So I think at 6.7, that's also a steal, but I just have kind of no visibility over what those pricing adjustments could look like if they do end up performing well this race week. Realistically, I can't see them going more than 3 million up in value if they do finish quite strongly. But again, I'm just not sure what's going to happen. I would find it very bizarre if, for whatever reason, they went up, say, more than 3 or 4 million after one race, because it would just disadvantage any non-owners and kind of make it a little unfair that 5% of your team value has increased in the matter of a week just from one asset alone. So let's hope the pricing adjustments are not a dog's breakfast like last season. But we'll just have to wait and see. Ferrari, as I mentioned, they're a proven commodity. They're going to be the second fastest car on track this weekend. Leclerc and Sainz, both excellent drivers, and you kind of know what you're getting from them. So expect them to be in the mix for podiums again. They've also got great straight line speed. So there's 4 big straights at Bahrain that should work in the favour of the Ferrari. But I guess the dilemma I'm grappling with at the moment is whether you go for a sure thing in Ferrari. You're probably going to get pretty stable points output from them, versus an Aston Martin, which there is a lot of potential, a lot of chatter around them delivering an exceptional car this season. At 6.7, it's cheap as hell, but probably a little bit more unpredictable compared to the Ferrari. So I'm really weighing up, do I go for the Ferrari proven points, guaranteed points, versus an Aston Martin where it's got a high ceiling, but probably a lower floor than the Ferrari. And do I run the risk if I go without them of excluding myself from getting that price increase if they have a good weekend? So anyway, that's something I'm thinking about, and I think it's pretty important because it will dictate how you kind of plan your team over the next few weeks if team value comes into consideration there. As far as other constructors are concerned, Mercedes, Alpine, they don't really speak volumes to me as of right now. The other thing I have some concern around is if you go too differential on the constructor front, you risk falling back early if they have a bad week. I guess the other side to that argument is that if the constructor absolutely bangs, your rank's going to soar. But I think the likelihood of that happening is pretty low, given what we've seen with Mercedes in pre-season testing. They're still figuring things out, and they've had a number of tweaks to the car over the course of the weekend, and I expect that's going to continue into this first race week. As for Alpine, they're a bit of an unknown commodity. They are expected to bring upgrades to this first race, so I think that's a plus in their books, but they did have the second lowest mileage of all constructors in testing, which is a little bit of a concern for me. I'm not saying that's a deal breaker, but you want to get as much on the board as possible in those 3 days to understand the car's capabilities and performance. So as far as constructors are concerned, I'm really not steering clear of these three I've got here, but let's just wait and see with testing. It would take, I think, a lot for me to change my decision on the constructors at the moment. For budget drivers, it's a bit of an interesting one for me. I find historically they have been definitely the most unpredictable of the bunch, just because of how they qualify, how they perform on race day, and the number of variables that come into play when they need to put forward a good score. So I've got a number in mind. If you've seen my previous videos, you know that I'm looking at Joe, Hulkenberg, Bottas, if you can consider him budget. So there's a few in the mix there that I'm tossing up, even Albon for that matter. But I guess the thing that you need to consider for this season is because there are a number of factors in relation to how the driver qualifies and the point scoring system for overtakes this season. That's really going to drive how your budget driver scores in 2023. So I guess the upside you want to look at are those drivers that qualify quite poorly but then make up ground on race day through overtakes because of the points there, as well as the reliability of the car, because you don't want to be going with a driver in a car that just seems to DNF every second race. Tsunoda was that last year, and I have concerns that he could well be, again, that driver. So AlphaTauri for me, I'm pretty much avoiding in this first race week. But for me, as I mentioned, Joe, what we saw in the Alfa Romeo in testing was looking pretty good. I guess the concern I have for him is that if he qualifies quite strongly, it makes it into Q2, and then falls back during the race, that's not going to work in favour of him because he's losing, I guess, net positions lost there are going to deduct points from his total. So you want to find someone that qualifies maybe at the top of Q1 and slowly makes their way up the grid, whether that's through poor strategy from other teams ahead of them or DNFs, whatever it might be. Just being able to get the right picks there are going to, you pick up an extra 10, 15 points across the board that weekend. So just something to consider there. Funnily enough, for a period of time last season, Latifi was actually one of those drivers where he'd, he'd qualify P19, P20, and then over the course of the race would, just slowly rack up his overtakes because of drivers falling back or with DNFs. So just something to consider there. I know Sargent's a popular pick for that matter, but for me, I'm not sure I'm going to be jumping on him from the get-go. As for chip usage, that's something I would encourage to avoid using this week. I don't really see the benefit of deploying it in the first week. I guess there is the allure of having the chip and the ranks much higher than your co-workers, your relatives, whatever you want to call it. But over the course of the season, utilizing that effectively at the right time is going to boost your ranks Further, for the majority of these, the best time to use it is going to be in the sprint race, with the exception of one or two, which no negative, for example, that could be saved definitely for a sprint race, but maybe even a wet weather race where there's a higher risk of cars DNFing, even falling behind. So I would definitely avoid at all costs deploying those this weekend, but we can definitely, over the course of the next few weeks, strategize as to when the best time to use those will be. So now I want to quickly revisit my team. What have we got here? Just for the week, I've kind of settled on two final builds, one of which was in my first video, or my team selection video earlier this week. Triple Red Bull, double Aston Martin, and then double Alfa Romeo. I still really like this build. The Red Bull, as I've said, looks really strong. And then the Alphas had some great drives on that second day of testing. Joe in particular really surprised me. And then the Aston Martin, as I've said, value for money. So you kind of know that unless they have a shocking race this weekend, their price is going to increase. So this is one build I really like. There's three locks in Verstappen, Alonso, and Red Bull that I think I'll carry through for certainly the first few races of this season. The other build I'm looking at is a Ferrari constructor build. So if I just scrap these three drivers, switch in a Ferrari, and then build the rest of this out through budgets. I've also covered this team in my previous video. I would drop in Albon. I think actually I keep Joe in that team because I really like him, and then Hulk. I think, I'm not sure about Albon. Hulk, I was a little cold on, admittedly, before testing, but at 4.3 million, that's an absolute steal. I said before, he's I think pretty evenly matched with Magnussen for that matter. So let's just see how practice shakes out on Friday. My thinking could very much change on some of these drivers come the end of practice, but I know my skeleton will certainly be Verstappen, Alonso, and Red Bull for this first week, with these three drivers along the bottom and that second constructor interchangeable. But again, practice is a great gauge for seeing how the drivers and constructors perform, so make sure you tune into that. Deadline will be on the Saturday, so set your alarms no matter where you are in the world, North America, Europe, Australia. So yeah, lots to look forward to. But yeah, this is just a brief preview of the race week. Bit less hair on my face and my head since my last video, but there's going to be a little bit more content before practice kicks off this Friday. I'm absolutely buzzing for this weekend, and it should be an awesome first race. So good luck to all of you, and I'll see you all very, very soon.